All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspire Me Forward to our sixth episode. And what a perfect day to have it on the beginning of spring, the
I
first full
know.
day of spring. That was not planned at all. I think that happened because February has 28 days and we had the same days. And look at that. And what a perfect time to talk about change when spring is in the air. We still have snow on the ground in Canada where I am. Heather, I don't know about you, but it's
Still
it's
quite a bit.
it's going slow, but it's going. Um, yeah, so welcome. And I'm excited to have Heather with us today. Heather, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself? And then we will dive right in.
Sure. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me. It's always strange to have the tables turned on me. I'm used to being the one asking the questions with my podcast, which is about intuition, which is how I met Linda, and that's called Seers, Beers, Knowers, and Doers, and she graciously said yes to me. And I am currently a naturopath in New Brunswick, Canada, and I work with people all over North America, even parts of Europe. And I have had a client in Australia and New Zealand, which has been fun. So everything is remote, or I would say 85% of what I do is remote. Even with my local clients, that's been a COVID blessing. So I've realized that I am way less distracted when I'm not in person. Being a bit of a crow, the physical body actually distracts me, like, oh, pretty earrings. Oh, nice haircut.
Shiny things.
Oh, yeah. Versus just tuning into the energy and the frequencies and being able to get out of the way
Yeah,
better.
yeah, excellent.
Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about
Ah,
what I'm doing at this point.
awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing about your journey to that point.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I work with
yeah,
animals and people, so everything I can do for people,
awesome.
I do with
Awesome.
animals.
Yeah, there seems to be a through line of horses and animals in our viewers and in our on our guests. So isn't that's awesome. That really says something, I think, that the animals are really holding that space and guiding us. So um
Very much so. It's
yeah,
been. Uh, I always wanted to be a vet when I was a kid, and now I can do it without the restrictions of the world of veterinarian world.
exactly. Those high marks we all had to get into vet school.
Yeah, and yeah, so many things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted to Heather and I talked about it a bit beforehand, and a few days before an episode, I always um well, what am I going to say at the beginning? And I'm not sure what I'm going to say. And as soon as it pops into my mind, within like 12 hours, something comes to me. That's that, that drawing it in, that intuition, but something always shows up. And it did. This time it absolutely did. Driving along, there's a interview on the radio, and it was with a gentleman called Adam Gropnik. He wrote for the New Yorker. And his book is called The Real Work, and it's about the mystery of mastery. It's mastering things. And he speaks about mastering sourdough and how COVID has given us a chance to sort of try new things. But he speaks about one part in particular. And he's talking about a magic trick that his son was telling him about. I guess his son was an apprentice to a magician, and they were talking about this really difficult and dangerous trick of catching a bullet in the teeth. And he asked his son, like, how do you do this? And this is on the radio, so I'm not giving any secrets away here. But he was talking about, like, well, they've got a titanium cup in their mouth. There's a laser spot on the rifle or whatever they're using. Um, and the father's like, well, that's not magic. And the son's like, well, yes, it is. And he's like, well, where? And he goes, actually catching it. It's that moment in time of doing it. And that really sort of struck me, like, about leaps of faith. There's like, we can lead up to it. It's like there's three parts. We can lead up to it, and there's a whole lot in that. There's that moment where we either take that fork in the road or we do that U-turn and go, that 180 and go, nope, life's going, I gotta go that way. And there's a moment where we do that, and then there's that afterwards. Is that there's that turning that page and moving into life a different life as we had before. So I hope today, as we maybe, I sense that as we're talking along here, that we sort of talk about what are those three spots in taking leaps of faith, and and as we go along in life, does our leap of faith muscle evolve, and does it get stronger, maybe easier to do things because we've done it once. Okay, that worked. Let's try this one. So
Right.
with that, I just that synchronicity. There's something that always jumps in and goes, talk about this. Like,
Yeah, for
thank
sure.
you.
Yeah, I had goosebumps when you're like, well, it's in the waiting, catching the bullet. Like,
Yeah, I know.
ooh.
We don't have to do that. But I will post that radio interview for folks to listen to too, because it was quite good. But I'd like to get into this, and Heather, get into your story, and have you share that. So let's just start right in, and with your big leap of faith. And I imagine as we're talking, we'll get into others, but you spoke of a sort of that big leap of faith that really struck you. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. Um, so it probably started when I was a little kid. Um, because what I did was not the Drummond thing to do. So there's a lineage of no entrepreneurs in my family. There were resourceful people, there were jack of all trades, but there weren't any entrepreneurs. So there was no frame of reference to, like, yeah, there was, yeah, that was a blank slate. So, and I didn't even know I was going to be an entrepreneur when I took the leap of faith. So it wasn't the Drummond thing to do to quit my job. There were Drummond things to do. And we kind of grew up in the Cunninghams, and we were not really, it was suburbia. I acted like a dog to get a dog. So I was already a risk taker as a kid. Like, I didn't mind going outside the box. My mom would call me Faye. Dad told me I talked too much at the dinner table, go talk to the birds. So I did, like, there were lots of ways that I didn't necessarily fit into the Drummond box, but there were certain things that we didn't grow up with. So nobody got divorced prior to my sister, and that was her leap of faith. And then there's been a couple since then in the cousins. And you got a job and you stuck to it, and you got the pension and you had security and you got an education. Like, we all trundled off to university, placidly, like, had the ability to do that. I got to university and it was freedom. It was like, woohoo! Like, yay! And so the engineer last 2 weeks, the science program lasted a year, and then it was just get me a degree to get me a job. Like, it was, I'm here to learn socially, I'm here to make connections. It was an expensive degree to get a job, but there was definitely a sense, without in hindsight, that I was fitting into boxes.
Mm.
And that was something that only really hit in hindsight, because it was just how we all grew up. Like, it was just what it was. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that whatsoever at all. And then, I did get the job after university, and it was in a unique situation where we were a self-managing team. So my dad was like, what do you mean you're 21 years old working at a call center with no manager on site, and you're learning how to do training manuals and hiring people, and you're learning how to fire people, and you're learning how to schedule people? Like, you're 21 years old. Like, this is, and so it was a really unique experience. I don't know if they do it very often, but in that space, we were 30 people, various ages, and that autonomy was something I didn't even know when I got the job was something I loved. Um, and then that job actually moved to Ontario. So I moved to Ontario, again, doing the Drummond thing, like, follow the work, like, stay employed. And then they offered me a position there for the same money I was making in the Maritimes, which you've got to understand there's a cost of living difference quite large between the two provinces, two areas of town. It would be like in the States, it might be Ohio to New York, it might be London to rural London, like rural England. So it didn't make sense for me to stay where I was. And so I came back with the same company, but to the very original job that I was working when I was hired. So it was kind of like a demotion, but I kept my wage. So I was still staying in that box, you know. And then I got another job with another company who was starting up a call center. So again, there was this opportunity to create without rules, but opportunity to build something new. And again, I didn't realize that that was something I enjoyed doing, the problem solving part. And I didn't realize in hindsight that I was actually building muscles for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
All the way along, I was building muscles for entrepreneurship. And in that role, I felt like I got an MBA from my direct lead, who was a VP of the company, a young person. And he sat me down one day and he's like, you not telling me things that are wrong doesn't help me make you look good, and it doesn't help me look good. And so I was like, oh, sitting up straight. This is how you actually do it. He's like, your job's to make me look good, and I can't make you look good if I don't know the problems to get them out of your way so that you can make me look good. And I was like, oh, very true. Because in our household, you sucked it up and you just made it happen. Right. And and you didn't bring up the stress, because the stress was, dad had to keep the job. We all followed dad around for the job. Like, the rest of us didn't have stress, and we really didn't. We were provided for. We were kids, mom had stress, but we never saw mom, because of generational, whatever, right? So, after having that position, I moved into a position in credit and collections where the department became a company. And again, I was thrust into the build anew, new rules, new ways, hire people, and so again, the muscles getting bigger without knowing it. But that part of the company started to take turns in things that rubbed my integrity the wrong way. And it was like, why is this showing up in my budget lines when I didn't spend that money? Or like just small things, but big things and no answers. And why are we collecting on things that people say they didn't actually buy? Like different things were showing up. And my staff was getting bonused on these things. And so eventually my boyfriend at the time was like, why are you working there? Like, you should quit your job. And I left him before I quit the job. And the hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I should have listened to the boyfriend. You get these messages from outside, right? Well, no, I got to work my 60 hours a week. I got to have my, I'm hungry now diet. I've got to have my burnouts. I've got to stay in this place because that's the Drummond thing to do. Like, that's just the Drummond thing to do. And so in one evening at that job, I was doing some work at an employee's desk because they were out on stress leave, and I was doing their work because we didn't have the budget to replace, blah, 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 like just what you do, right? In a business. And I heard the words, I'm done. Nobody else is around.
Who said that?
I'm like, I'm done. What's that look like? And I had two bosses. I had a female boss who looked after the first party collections, and I had a male boss who was president of the company who looked after the third party collections. And so I called my female boss at that point that day. And I'm like, so I just heard the words, I'm done. And we had similar rubs and it was the girls, right? So there was a comfortable relationship that we had developed, that there was safety there, and we saw the same things. We butt heads about the same things with other people in the company, but we were doing the role that we were brought up to do.
Yeah.
And she's like, you can't leave me. And I'm like,
Gotta, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I looked around at my staff, and I was very codependent with work, number one, being the 60-hour boss, doing everybody's stuff as a backup for everybody. You know, I was the boss who I would put the vitamin C on the table and say, pour, don't dig, like, please don't get sick. We don't, like, we need you at work. Like,
No.
And yeah, there was like, these were my family. Like, I spent more time with them than anybody else. So there was a codependent, they need me, like, and so it went from February till June 30th. And I said, nope, I'm done. I have to do this. And I called up the mail boss, and I said, yeah, I'm leaving. I'm done. He's like, I said, I'd give you a month's notice, which again was a Drummond thing to do. Over, like, never, like, ever. Don't anybody quitting their job give more than 2 weeks. Or whatever the legal thing is. Never. But I will train the replacement. I will stick around. I'll be available. I'll And nobody was, and he was like, well, hold on a minute. Why? Like, no, like, you should, like, if you're tired, just go on sick leave. And I'm like, I'm not sick. I'm not sick. Why would I go on sick leave?
Wow.
And in hindsight, it made sense why he was offering that. But like, I'm not sick. I'm done. Like, you know, if you want to find somebody, like, I'll help you hire them. I'll help you train them. I'll help blah, blah, blah. And nobody was coming. Nothing was moving. There was no posting. And I was like smiling, lying, you know, walking around my staff knowing I was leaving, and nobody knowing, and having to be authentic. And then the boss, the male, came down for supper the night before I left. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And he sits down. He's like, yeah, so we're closing your office. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, you get to tell them, because tomorrow's my last day, and I'm done. Like, I'm not responsible for this.
Yeah.
And he's like, yep, no problem. Just letting you know. And then I was like, okay, so I would have got a severance if I was on stress leave. So he was trying without being able to tell me for whatever reason what was going on. And my staff looked at me, did you know? And I'm like, if I knew, I'd be getting stressed. So in that moment, I was like, yay, I'm standing in integrity.
Of course.
But then it became this codependent, like, I'm no longer responsible, and spent 2 weeks of my vacation with my sister trying to help them get a better severance and blah, 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 blah. Because my head basically exploded with what was what. And I was just like, okay, the whole safety net for me when I quit my job was Eat, Pray, Love was out at that time. I'm like, okay, financially I can do a year. Like, I'll just do a year. And that kind of fit, because I only told my parents that I quit my job after I gave the notice. And that was the story.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand, they're BC, I'm in New Brunswick, which is the entire country of Canada apart. So it was really easy to have an autonomous life until you have to be truthful about stuff that's kind of big.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, are you okay? Do we have to put you on a plane? Like, are you coming home? Are you having a breakdown? Like, what's going on? I quit a job. And they're like, you quit your job? Yeah, I quit a job. You know, bawling, like, you know, because of the stress of doing the non-Drummond thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you okay with that? yeah, are you going to be happy? Are you happy? Are you like, is this better? Yeah, 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 yeah. And then the poof, everything was gone. Tears, everything. Yeah, no. Do you need to get on a plane, Heather? No, if you're okay, I'm okay. Like, I'm totally fine. Woo. Who stole my parents? Like, what happened there? You know? And how often do we build up all these? What I've learned now is something in some circles is called presumptive realities, where we make up all these stories
Yeah.
to keep us stuck, and all these relational realities, which is, again, those are access consciousness things that I've learned about in the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they are things that hold us in stuck places. They hold us as stasis
Yep.
in like mud up to here, because we don't want the ramifications of what being true to ourselves actually looks like.
Yep.
And as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, let me just take all those off.
Strip
How are
down.
you? I'm good. I'm really good. Like, I'm on eat, pray, love time now. This is great.
Off that, wherever I'm off to.
Yeah. And so
Awesome.
that was a huge relief. And they've been big support all the way through all the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, even though they don't really understand some of it. Like, my mother's like, do you make any money on your podcast, Heather? I'm like, no, I don't make any money. Not that I can actually, it's not monetized.
Mm.
She's like, well, why do you do it? I'm like, because I'm meeting all these cool people. And every time I look up and go, am I still doing this? It's yes, because it's in the field for some amazing reason. And I'm okay with that.
100%.
And so, like, they don't get it always, but they're very supportive. So I'm very blessed that way.
Yeah.
But the Eat, Pray, Love thing was kind of that middle part when you talk about your introduction, because it was okay, I have freedom. I almost called it retirement, because I had total autonomy over, I could read what I want to read. Like, those things were good. And literally I'd met somebody in the February I heard I'm done.
Really?
And meet and greet, who was opening up a school literally less than a kilometer from my house in holistic nutrition. I'm like, oh, that's cool. In February, that's cool. And then I was like 3 days before the school started, I registered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I walked to school
Okay.
from September till May.
Yeah.
And I learned how to make soup because I had time. I learned how to dive into things that I had already dove into a little bit in my career, because I grew up with a mom who fixed herself with reflexology, and we had to eat broccoli before we had pancakes. And so there was already this underpinning of fix yourself.
Yeah.
And then when school was done and Eat, Pray, Love was coming undone, and I was like, oh, I don't really want to go back. How do we not go back? Like, I'm 36. I'm not, I'm not set for life here. What does that look like? And so I was walking, because I had time to walk in the woods.
Yeah.
I was walking in the woods one day, and it's like, start a company. You're a holistic nutritionist. You have a title now. Okay, sure. Like, well, what do I call it? 2 walks later, healing vitality. Like, oh, that's catchy. I like that.
There it is. It's like you're just grabbing it. It's just
It was, yeah. And what was interesting is, if I stayed out of the way and didn't let the Drummond learned behavior of worry from my mother, my blessed mother, who knew too much, was very intuitive, a nurse, saw too much,
Mm.
those things, a mother, blah, 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 all those things. If I didn't learn to worry, probably would have done better in business in the start.
Mhm.
And if I had trusted more in myself and not in others, I would have also done better in
Mhm.
business,
Yeah.
financially and otherwise. But I had to learn a whole bunch of lessons,
Yeah.
hanging out with people
Yeah.
that knew better and on those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Oh,
have your lessons regardless of what path you choose. You're still gonna have your lessons. So all the codependent stuff still, whether I was an entrepreneur or working for a corporation,
yeah.
those lessons, all that stuff still got
Yeah.
worked through.
And I love how you said about you were building those muscles, even though you didn't know you were building those muscles. You were building them beforehand, and that autonomy and that creativity and building new things. That was all. We just don't know it, and I think we come to a point in our lives where we start to know it. So we
Yeah,
start to trust and go, everything I'm learning now is coming for a reason.
yeah,
So I'm going to go with it. Whereas there's time, an earlier point in our life where we're like, why am I doing this?
yeah,
Or I think you stuck on it that there were things that you did that felt good,
yeah.
like the autonomy and the creativity felt it was a feeling in them.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
and like to go back a little bit into why I love freedom so much, or what it is about freedom, is when I was in grade 8, my dad's job moved us across the country from BC to Truro, and I felt like I was in this thing.
Okay.
Nothing against Truro. My parents loved it.
Mm.
I was a grade 9 in this thing.
Ah,
And so when I got to university, I was like, okay. Whew,
yeah. Space.
whew. And
Yeah.
so learning was not the priority. And so it became, and I'd never learned how to learn. I learned how to learn when I went back to school because it was something that I wanted to do,
Mm. Yeah.
um, as opposed to just filling buckets kind of thing.
Yeah.
Came
When did
closer.
when did
Yeah.
you decide to go back to school? Like, was there that time in February where you said you'd heard about the school, like about it, but
Yeah.
where in that point did you go, I think I want to go to school? Or was it 3 days before the school?
It was 3 days before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
3 days before, and I was like, "Hey, is it too late to register for that?" And interestingly, because I was off work,
Mm.
I was able to. In Canada, we have these things called registered retirement savings plan, and you
Mm.
can use them outside of retirement for two things. Back then, you could use them towards a house, or you could use them towards education. So I
Ah,
took money out
okay.
towards the education, and you paid it back like
Mm.
10%, 10 years, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
um so it was just like, oh well, that was also a gift of working corporate, because there was cash flow there to do that, and it didn't
Yeah.
involve a loan or anything. That, well, kind of a loan, but a loan
Yeah.
for, so
Interesting. Yeah.
wouldn't have a clue, right? And I'd gone to, I mean, I I took freedom quite far when I left home. Um, like there was no broccoli before pancakes in my house under my roof. So my
Good.
diet and my burnouts were directly related. And I had some other health concerns while I was actually in my corporate life
Mhm.
that probably were diet related in hindsight, because I
Yeah.
wasn't feeding my body because I was working.
Yep. And stress.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and stress on top of that was like, but I'd go to reflexology, I'd get massages, I was investigating that side of thing. I was always curious about that side of thing. And I had actually had a test done 3 times with the machine that I currently use at a local shop while I was working corporate. So I'd been exposed to that machine
Yeah.
in those prior years. And then when I was finishing up my education, I went to an orthomolecular conference in Ottawa with the owner of the business and another student. And I'm seeing this machine demoing at their little expo, and the lady tells me, you could use a Bach flower called walnut and wild oat. And I was like, what are those? And in that moment, it was May, we were done classes, and I didn't know what I was doing yet, hadn't had the epiphanies. And she's like, one's about getting rid of or energetic boundaries and getting out of the influence of others, and the other one's figuring out what you want to do with your life. And she used this machine on me to find those things out. So I was like, that machine does emotions? Like, I need that machine. And I hadn't had the epiphany that I was starting a business.
Yeah.
But then when I had the epiphany I was starting a business, I contacted the lady I met in Ottawa and said, I need that machine. How do I get that machine? And my business uses that machine to do emotional, physical, and energetic health assessments.
Yeah.
Because of that Bach flower nailed it.
Of course. Yeah.
In 2 seconds, when I was like, oh, there's that machine. What do we test me? What do I need?
Tell me what else.
Yeah. Like, okay.
Yeah, but it's really interesting that what I spoke of at the beginning and what you said, and what I've felt in my leaps of faith is it isn't always as easy as catching the bullet or switching the button, pressing the button. And when you talked about presumptive realities, it's like there's a shedding. That's the word that comes to me, but there's a shedding that needs to happen. So yeah, I can press send on an email that's I'm resigning, but there's so much more. And I know when I left, there was a month's worth of just shedding trauma for the world I had worked in. There was those presumptive realities myself and telling people. And so I don't think it's as cut and dried. And I think, yeah, we can push that button, but there's shedding.
That's a really good way of putting it, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you are stepping into that leap of faith is leading you to who you actually are. And you are literally shedding those exterior coats that you wore to take you away from who you thought you should be. Because I think those leaps of faith are literally lily pad leaps or leaps off a cliff or whatever. To like fly, you're ready to fly, like I'm gonna shove you out the nest. Here you go, fly. Like you don't have any idea.
Wings,
like yeah, you got. What do they say? Oh, there's a beautiful song that's it's called "Live Your Daydream," and look it up. Look it up. America's Got Talent. Live Your Daydream. And one of the lines in this song is you have to fall before you fly.
Yeah.
Everybody does. And so it's that, okay, don't hold your breath while you're falling. Trust.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Trust. And so that looking up, is this podcast still going? Yeah. Okay. Like, all right, I'll just keep doing it. Whatever.
Exactly. I found myself opening the door slowly for that new chapter. I thought it would be like one day and then doors open, off we go. But then I found it's like, oh, it was a bit of a shock to go, oh, no, wait a minute. That's not how it works. And then like I would open that door to new things. It would be ajar for a while until, okay. And then, let everything come in at once. It seemed to be a lot to have everything just jump in. And
well, and that's a really good point, because I took, I became part of kind of like a mastermind with another podcast guest, Kelly Marie, and she was holding a container. And one of the things she was working with was human design. Another piece was nervous system regulation and intuition. So the human design thing is really cool. It's basically a map of what being you looks like from like 7 different things like astrology
Nice.
and numerology and all these different things. So
Mhm.
go look it up. It's
I
very
will.
curious. And the nervous system piece I had gotten into probably 3 or 4 years before that. But she made a point of saying you have to build capacity in your nervous system in order to make
Mhm.
change. And you're talking
Mm.
exactly about that because you
Yeah.
were coming from trauma business
Mhm.
where you were regulating people's nervous systems regularly
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
also regulating your own. But there's wear and tear in blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yeah.
And then you trigger your own stuff because you're the one making the change. It's
Yeah.
different when it's your nervous system for your stuff, I find,
Yeah.
than when
Yeah.
you're holding space for other people's nervous systems. Totally
Exactly.
different.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
interesting that you did it in increments because you were likely, with knowing or unknowing,
Mhm.
um, creating capacity in your nervous system to make the change.
Well, and that shedding, I think that shedding that we spoke of gives you space.
Mm,
And you talk about, you sort of mentioned that you had space to sort of find out who you were.
yeah.
And that shedding, I think sort of you have to sort of, okay, we're done with this and we're done with that. And interesting.
Well,
Now,
and
yeah, go ahead.
seriously, I threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mhm.
Because I assumed immaturely, I assumed everything that I learned in corporate was bad because I was leaving corporate.
Yeah, yeah.
So my discernment or my spidey sense with all those hiring and people skill stuff that I did well in corporate, I literally invited two people with narcissistic tendencies into my best friend chair.
Mm, mm,
And so I always blame the fact I threw the baby with the bathwater
yeah.
because, but like, you need to learn, you're going to learn the lessons regardless. So did I really throw the baby out with the bathwater? Or I needed to learn about,
Needed.
life
Yeah.
in those circumstances because it's come across my work table a lot.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
just my life table too. But it's curious that I think when we talk about shedding, there is an essence of that caterpillar that is sitting in that butterfly,
Mm, beautifully put. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we don't die when we morph, we actually just morph. Um, and it's still the same. It's still the same. And so recognizing what like to keep
Mm,
what
yeah.
is true to us and not keep what's not true to us
Yeah.
is the parts that is where the shedding is curious because like maybe I didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think consciously or unconsciously I blamed that. Whether it was true or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Interesting.
no idea, but yeah, I
Interesting.
love that
Yeah.
you also have taken what you've done in your career
Mm,
and are shedding light on it for others because I think that creating the safe container for
yeah.
people to see all these different people that have done it all these different ways, from rip the band-aid to like, okay, put the toe outside the door.
Exactly. And I was saying to somebody last night actually how, and this was all intuitive, how this all started, but we're talking about, well, who is this for? And I just thought it's for everybody. Like it's for everybody listening. And I hope those that are listening gain inspiration from it. But it's for those that are speaking, like guests. But then I realized that's for me too. Like
Oh yeah,
it keeps
oh
me
yeah,
it keeps me going through these stages of life change. And it's like, oh yeah, yes, 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 that sounds familiar. Yes, that's how they got through it. So, there's sort of light that it's for everybody,
yeah,
like
oh
all
yeah.
those involved. So
Yeah.
I'd love to chat because I'll be cognizant of our time here. your podcast. I'd love to know how that what brought that in. What was that heart of your from your heart that started? I'd love to
Well,
know this.
yeah, that so it literally came from dog sitting a friend's dog. So the dog brought me the podcast.
Wow.
And I mean, I've had a dog inspire a kids camp, so it's like, okay, I'm not surprised. But my two dear friends, both of them got very sick like in 20 just New Year's 2019. One was put in the hospital with pneumonia. He was a smoker. Like it was like scary. And my original friend, both of them became are beautiful friends at this point. But the my girlfriend, she was sick with H1N1, I think at the time was what was flying around.
Yep.
And like she's never been that sick before in her life, kind of thing. And she and I had gone through the School of Natural Nutrition together. So I was like, holy cow, what can I do to help you? Do you need soup? Do you need She's like, don't even come. Like, don't come. Like our house is contagious, but take the dog because I can't get out of bed to take the dog anywhere. So I'm like, okay. She's like, I will sanitize the dog. Like, you will sanitize the dog. Like, wow, I don't know
how you do that, but okay.
But okay. So the dog was 1 year old, and I adopt old dogs. Like I live in a condo, and get in the car to go to the woods to walk. Like there's a porch basically, and a common area. But it was January, and this is a 1 year old dog. They have a lot of energy. And there's a reason I don't have puppies. It's like, oh my gosh. And so my whole life got flipped upside down, like on no notice, because I was like, sure, I'll come get it now. So we were up at 5 to go pee. Like we were all these different, like we were walking outside at different times because the bladder's small. And that insertion of new energy, that change in the routine, that, oh my gosh, I've got 2 cats and you are chasing them and this is not good. Like that, okay, you're gonna be tied to me and we're gonna have fun, you and me, and leave the cats alone. So we got bonded very quickly because I then became his safe place, and I made sure that no cats were ripping his eyes out because I didn't want that vet bill.
No.
Literally, probably 4 days in, I'm trying to get back to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning after taking him outside in January in the freezing cold. Like you get bundled up here in Canada.
Exactly.
You have your pajamas underneath the sweatpants, underneath the
Hence we love spring.
yes. And I'm trying to go to sleep, and it's like, you need to do a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? I don't know what a podcast is. Literally, I don't know what a podcast is. What? So I'm like, okay, yeah, it's going to be on intuition. I'm like, well, I don't know what a podcast is, but intuition, okay, I get that, but what is that? And so I get up in the morning, I'm like looking at podcasts. I'm like, oh, it's like a radio show. Okay. Okay. And so I happened to be telling my nephew, who you got to understand, they're in their university years, blah, blah, blah. He would just reach out periodically with everybody in the family and touch base. He's Pisces. So he's like, got to make sure his family's okay periodically. And so he does this, like 3 days later, he's like, hey, Ed, how are you doing? What's going on? And, checking in on his 49-year-old aunt. How you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. Do you know anything about podcasts? He's like, well, actually, my roommate does the business podcast here at Acadia. Do you want me to get you to talk to him? He's right here. I'm like, oh, sure.
Voila.
No problem. Great. So me and Brendan get on a call. 2 days later, he tells me about the software. He tells me about, you need this mic, you need that thing, and it's just, you hit record and you can make it really fancy, you can make it not so fancy, and this is what you do. Like, great, I think I can do that. My first podcast guest, because I called my web designer and I said, okay, so I'm doing a podcast. What do I need to do to know that it, and she's like, well, you need to have a whole bunch in the lineup. Like you're gonna have times when you don't have anybody and you need to be consistent. And I'm like, okay. So it was 9 months of talking to people.
Yeah.
My first podcast guest she brought me the microphone. She's like, here, use mine. I'm not using it. I'm like, no, great. And then so 2 years later, I'm like, I think I'm buying your microphone. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah,
I
I
know.
forgot about that. I said, so did I, but here, I'm gonna buy your microphone. And yeah, so it's just been this wonderful serendipitous, literally launched the podcast 9 months later. Found a virtual assistant. She makes it pretty. She keeps me on time. She is
Yeah.
delightful. And have made the art of watching and picking up pings of who the heck I should ask on my podcast. Hey, do you want to be on my podcast? What's it about? Oh, it's this. Would you talk to me about that? And then having literally this light bright board. I don't literally have one, but that's what I see in my head.
Of course. Yeah.
All these light brights around the world that I've connected with and had intimate half hour and a half long conversations with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Talk about stuff you don't normally. It's not like, how are you? I'm fine. It's like, no, that's not our podcast.
No. But don't you find it? Do you find like it grows exponentially? And as you sort of hit that halfway point, well, they all know people that'd be really interesting to talk to, and it just becomes this beautiful snowball that and your list of people you've talked to is incredible.
It's fun. It's because you don't know my attitude, and I mean, I'm not really good at selling myself per se, but this isn't selling anything, and I have no problem just, well, what's the harm in asking? All I can do is say no. And in September, when I launched, is like the end of September, I got into horses and I went big into horses in my learning, like, oh my gosh, I love these animals. Oh my gosh. So it gave me the opportunity to reach out to these horse people around the world.
Yeah.
And connect with these people who were like-minded in these animals are sentient. Like, so I got to pick and choose. I wasn't going to be talking to people that didn't get the intuition of it.
Of course. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been this delightful way to, and then COVID happened and I was like, sweet, I'm just
keep going.
I'm just gonna keep going because I just don't do it in person. Like, let's just do whatever.
Yeah.
That's the podcast story.
That's awesome, and I will put a link up for sure for that, for your whole podcast, because that's such inspiring and such interesting conversations. I remember the one we had, and it just, you don't know where it's going to go, and it just goes in these beautiful directions and goes down these beautiful paths that.
So true. And you don't know how many people I'm like, Linda told me this really cool thing. She has a basket and you literally have all the sensory things in the basket, and that is going to make you present. Like, you need to. So
yeah, that's a big one.
It's huge. And I always give you credit because it's like, I didn't come up with that. And so these conversations are about spreading, like you're having them, like they're about spreading whatever's in the field that needs to be spread. Like, it's kind of, you don't know.
Yeah. I think there's, it's interesting you say that, because to me, there's spreading that resonance, like things you're saying. I'm going, oh yeah. The Drummond way, we had the Watson way. Like, it's, I so get that, and that stepping out of those boxes. So there's that resonance, and then there's that new information and those new ideas that somebody, like the basket, like somebody says, and you're like, oh yeah, let's try that. So that there's so much richness in it all, or just that comfort that there's a community out there. of people, and community herd, however we want to call it. But there's, and that just, again, that grows in exponentially the more we listen and we open up to it, because that's, yeah, just to hear other people talk and yourself talk, and it's like, I'm not alone.
Oh gosh, no.
Because
Yeah.
but often I think people feel they're alone, and then this, the inspiring or the intuitive parts of it is like, oh no, I'm not alone.
Mm.
Yeah, I can do it too. So wow, wow, I love it. I love it. As we start to wrap up here, I would love to get some wisdom from you. So we usually ask our
I feel
guests
like I
for
talked the whole time.
3 pieces.
Like,
Yeah, I know this is it. It's like 3 more pieces, or if you
no,
could.
no, I don't mind talking, but I'm it wasn't much of a conversation. I just kept on going for whatever
No,
reason.
it's oh my goodness. This I literally, when I go through this afterwards to write a summary, I handwrite at least 4 pages of wisdom. So it's amazing what comes out. But if you could crack this down to, or pack it in three little gifts of wisdom,
Mm.
what would you maybe do?
Mm. So, uh, trust yourself. Trust yourself. Trust, trust yourself is broad. So, don't question the words from the dogs that you hear, the horses. That's also inside you. That's trusting yourself. Um, if presumptive realities is a word that, or relational realities is a word that you want to investigate, go
Yeah.
YouTubing, like, or whatever way that shedding resonates with you. Um, that's that's a part that is curiously in the way of leaping forward. That's hidden.
Yeah.
It's not always apparent, because that cocoon of the realities that keep us stuck is the thing that we need to break through. Like you said, it's the shedding is bang on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't stop. The leaps of faith don't stop. Like, just because you did the leap of faith, like the big one that this one was about was me quitting my job. Like, every step forward is a leap of faith, because it's uncharted territory if you're listening to your intuition. Like, it's not always familiar. It's not always, but you've had muscle training for it before. It just may never look like what you thought it would. Like, so getting out of the expectation place and getting into the surrender place is a practice, and surrendering involves receiving, and that's sometimes a bizarre place that we're not trained in often.
I'm laughing because I literally talked to somebody yesterday about that, and receiving, I believe, is harder than giving.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's programmed. It's been programmed into us that it's
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I can give lots, but to somebody actually to give me something and really receive it with my heart, it's not easy. So that I'm glad you said that. That's really, that's a huge piece of, I think that's a huge piece of wisdom there, is just to practice that one. Yeah.
Well, and we're heading into, galactically, astrologically, like blah blah blah. We're heading into a place where, divine feminine, whatever people want to call it, is we do have to build that muscle of receiving more, in order to survive as a species. If we look back in the, like, really true original people, which we all are, each a true original person, we've just actually been programmed, or whatever the word is, colonized, like whatever the word is,
Yeah.
away from who we are.
Yeah.
And that's the shedding that we do. And so if you think about when money didn't exist,
Yeah.
it was just a way of life to give and receive.
Yeah.
That was called survival, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You had
Yeah.
to receive from the land, you had to receive from others, you had to, like, it's bizarre that it's been, um, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. It's been whatever. And
No,
so to
that's such a great point. Yeah.
get
That's,
back to it is
yeah.
a shedding as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a practice, because it is a lot of those presumptive realities about, oh, they invited you to dinner, you should have dinner for them, like, tit for tat, and all. And even the energetic exchange thing is like, yeah, there is an energy to that that's supportive and necessary. But intuitively, if you're just supposed to receive or if you're just supposed to give, then that's also an alignment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, as opposed to being in a structure of, well, they invited me last Sunday, I should have them over this
That's,
Saturday and check it off the list. That's
that's
the
a
Drummond thing for
generational.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Right.
remember. Yeah. If it comes
Um,
from here, it's, if you could, and like, I think you've, for me at least, I know you've already done this so many of these places that I'm going to take this with me and sort of sit with it. Because it's just so, my word is raw, but I mean that in a good, like a beautiful way. It sits with me. It sits in my heart. These have landed in my heart and gone, yeah, sit with this and think about this. And
nice.
so I
I
thank
remember
you for that.
that.
If you had, though, a call to action, if you had one thing that you could say to folks that are listening to this, and if it was like a call to action to say, hey, the next little while, do this.
I'm going to challenge people to listen to that song, Live Your Daydream,
Oh, I'll post that for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
to the words of that song, um, because she talks about being a child and it was acceptable to daydream about being an astronaut and whoever. And at 18, it's like, oh no, you need a plan B. That's too risky. Literally verbatim. And
Yeah.
then she's like, no, you need to go live your daydream. And so
Yeah.
that would be my challenge, because if you're living your daydream, you are being you
Yeah.
and you're in the flow of
Yeah.
intuition and making the leaps and whatever. So listen to that song.
I
Go
will. I will put that up for sure. Yeah.
go put that song.
I love it. No, I can picture the girl that's did it now. I can just, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a story there. Like, she in the America's Got Talent or whatever, she starts with her story, and there's a story there. There's a reason she's doing it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
butterflies were a thing. So I mean, there's just so many subliminal,
Mm,
and if you sing, you're actually balancing your nervous system.
of
So
course. Absolutely. Absolutely.
sing that song would be part two.
Oh, no, it's perfect. No, I love it. That's a really tangible thing people do. So we'll put that up right away. And I heard something the other day, and it was a little set of cards I just got, and one of them, and it's about living, intuitively and living, your best life and all that. But one of them was, when you were young, what was your moon dream? And I'm like, I don't even know I never heard of a moon dream. So
No,
I'm gonna have to look that one up and see. But I don't know if I've never heard of it put as a moon dream.
I
So
know, me neither.
no, so I'll look that one
I
up.
got goosebumps though. Gonna have to look it up myself now.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Do you have a few minutes just to tell people what you've got going on now? Just
Sure. I guess the daydream is, I've been so enjoying working with horses and their owners who are aligned with seeing them as sentient beings and wanting to make deeper connections. So animal connection, animal communication, going into, like, what's the connection here? Is there past lives? Have you guys done stuff? Like, getting into supporting the horses physically with reverse polarity and the owners physically and also energetically. So helping them balance their codependent nature, like carrying the empathy and the weight of the world. Well, that transfers to the horse. So if the horse can inspire you because I'm seeing the burden there, that's one of the that's my daydream is like, let's just work with horses. Can I just work with horses? And work with the aligned owners. So wonderful. I love doing my regular, done it for 17 years working with people. But the horses have this magic of them that
Excellent.
just adds another layer of joy in my heart. So
they are guiding us somewhere, that's for sure.
yeah.
So we will put all those links. We'll share all those links of things you're doing and your business and your podcast and all that. We'll put links up when I share the summary of this. Thank you for coming and sharing this time with me. Now we're even now. We've been on both sides of the. Our table is round. We can just keep going.
Yeah, you've invited me back to dinner. We're even.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I received more in this one. I really do.
Oh, I don't know. I've got a lot of notes. Thank you all that are listening to this. We hope you have been inspired. And I always like to finish with a quote from my late father. He loved to, he loved to write and write stories. But one thing I found in some of his little notes, it was about inspiration. And it was that inspiration is the door to which we see the future. May we ever keep it open. And I found that just before I started doing this.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And it's just such a beautiful quote. So with that, we will close. We will see you on April 7th, I guess. And we have a surprise guest that time. So somebody suggested that, why didn't I do one? So I'm going to be on the other side of the table. I have somebody coming in to interview me. So somebody is going to come on the other side of the table and do that. So that'll be fun. And I get how hard it is to be on that side of the table too. So that should be interesting to do. So with that, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Heather, again. And you guys stay here for a bit, and thank you all for listening.